So it's time to open the recommendations list that he made for me.
She gave me one, so I decided I would return the favor. I'm
so excited!
It was fun picking them out.
Oh, I love these scratch-off stickers. I'm so excited about them. Okay.
Do you know what any of them are?
I think I have a guess for this one.
For this one?
Yeah. It's time to kick this off and scratch one of these off that he's picked for me.
You got 6 right there.
I like how many romances there are in here. He knows my taste.
Yep.
They all look so good!
This one's actually a romance too.
I think I'm just going to start with the first one, because they all seem so good. And Young Adult Romance Book 2 in the series you've started, I have a suspicion about what this is.
What's your guess?
I'm going to guess it's the sequel to Scythe.
One way to find out. It's not working as well as
No, but the angle is bad. There we go. Once I get the right angle, it goes on smooth.
Yeah.
So my prediction was right.
Yep.
And it's Thunderhead. You know what?
Now I know which one to scratch off of mine.
I was about to say that. You should go grab your scratch-off sheet. And then we can read it together. Because I think I also put this on his, which I have not confirmed or denied.
Well,
he just guessed it. Yeah. It's too hard to keep secrets from him. I'm not a good liar, and he's too intuitive. Here's the clipboard.
There's 2 sci-fi books on here.
So the stakes are high. You gotta figure out which one it is. So.
We got there.
I can't believe we both put it on each other's and neither of us have read it.
Well, the first one was really good.
The first one was really good and it was really fun to read it with you. So I'm excited we're gonna get to read them together again. And then I'm excited to explore the rest of this list. First book of the video down. He put it on my sheet and I put it on mine. I feel like when we put it on each other's sheets, we were both projecting a little bit. Like this is a book that I want to read soon. And I also want you to read it soon so we could read it together. Is that also why you put it on my sheet?
I put it on there, yeah. I also figured that it was maybe on mine, so I put it on yours so we could read it together. And we both really enjoyed the first one.
We did. And reading it together was so good. Because Scythe is like the story of a world where it's a utopia and they've eradicated death, but then they're like, oh no, our population is growing too fast. So then they have a new job, which is the Scythe.
To go kill you.
Who are just really philosophical book. And so it's really nice to read it with another person so you get to discuss all that philosophy. So in this book, Thunderhead, first question I think, did you like it more or less than book 1?
There were parts of it that I liked better than book 1. I think overall, I probably didn't like it quite as much.
Same. I think I didn't like it quite a bit more than book 1. Like, I still liked it.
Yeah, it's still a good
But I
book.
didn't love it like book 1. And I feel like for me, the heart of that is that book 1, we had like 2 main narrators and very rarely went outside them. They were like journal entries from other people, but 2 main narrators. And then in this book, it gets so loosey-goosey with its narrators. It adds in like 5 more people. And in the end, we're spending more time with people who aren't our protagonists than are. We're spending with various antagonists and various random bystanders.
The random bystander POV.
The random bystander POVs. It's like, come on, we didn't need this. It felt like, for me, I loved how the first book was pretty character-focused, and I feel like you can't be character-focused when your priorities aren't on following the characters. And this book's priorities were so obviously not on following the characters by how loose they were with the point of views, and it drove me crazy. And every time we had a point of view of a character that I didn't care about, like random bystander or random villain who we didn't actually need to give this exposition dump, like, hated it.
Yeah. At this core, this book has 4 main characters. 2 from the previous book. It's got the AI robot managing the world.
Called the Thunderhead.
And it's got this new character in the book who like kind of works for the Thunderhead. And if it had stuck to those characters more, probably would have worked really well.
Totally.
I personally didn't super mind the extra POVs. I think my main problem with the book was the antagonist. They felt really contrived, and I also thought they didn't ever really do much.
Another thing that bothers me about the Thunderhead is there were some really powerful moments in book 1 where characters made some really big moves and decisions. And then this book undoes some of those moves and decisions. And I'm like, No! Like, that was important to the character arc! It feels very much like the world is just a sandbox that the author is playing in, and that creates some really big plot twists and big moments and cliffhangers at the end of this book. And I see why this book is so highly rated, because you get to the end and you're like, what just happened? I need book 3 right now!
The end is very powerful.
But I think overall the book is less powerful because it's so much less focused in both the plot and the characters.
As I was reading this book, it kind of felt to me less of a sequel and more of a hypothetical the author wants to continue writing in this world, but not actually affect anything.
Oh, you know what that reminds me of?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to bring it up too. Just remember that.
So, when he was giving me the pitch for this book, he quoted a 1-star review, which says, if this book were actually just fan fiction, I wouldn't have been able to tell. And yeah.
I can kind of see what they're going
I
for.
get what they're saying, and I kind of agree. But it definitely did feel like the author was making a fan fiction of their own work in the way that it was betraying character motivations and being way less focused and organized and just generally feeling less deep than book 1. Like, book 1 felt masterful and deep, and book 2 felt exciting.
As I was reading it, it felt to me like Neil Shusterman came at this book with ideas in mind for the middle and for the end. He knew that he wanted those 2 scenes to happen, and so he wrote them. And then was like, okay, now how do we get there? And then he made the characters go there instead of letting the characters be themselves.
I would give Thunderhead 3 stars. In contrast, the first book I gave 4 stars.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Had some very interesting parts. The new character, one of my favorites. Very interesting to see character working for the Thunderhead and all that stuff. But
so, I guess we'll read book 3. I don't think I'm going to put it on your scratch off. Not quite as high priority as that. I'm making him a new scratch off when he finishes this one, by the way, because it's so much fun.
2 books.
For me, I have 6 books left. The next
4
one I'm going to be
left.
reading.
6 books total.
I've taken more math classes. He's better at simple math, which is the important math. Who cares that I'm better at calculus? Like, he can do addition. Anyway, I have 5 books left, and I've already scratched off the next one, Blood Heir.
It's
and I'm
still
reading
only
next.
4 books left.
No, I haven't read this one yet.
Oh, that's right.
Something that I often tell myself is like, it doesn't matter what it's rated on Goodreads, you can still love a low-rated book and still hate a high-rated book. And yet, no matter how many times I tell myself that, I'm still swayed by rating. I'm still seeking out highly rated books and avoiding slightly lower-rated books, even if my actual ratings barely correlate with it. Anyway, but the point is, this book, Blood Heir, has a very high rating. On Goodreads, it has a 4.5. And part of that is that it's kind of like a sequel book to another series. So the people picking it up are the people already obsessed with the other series. And the other part of it, I have no idea. I'm so confused because this book was not good. I said it, all you people who gave it 5 stars are wrong. I'm the only one with correct opinions in this world. That's how it works, of course. So Blood Heir is a urban fantasy, vaguely apocalyptic setting, and our protagonist is this woman named Julie, and she's been gone from her hometown for many years, off adventuring and training and learning magic, and now she's coming back because a prophecy of doom and gloom has called her there. And while she's there, she's also encountering the grief of not seeing her family for years, and now she's back in their stomping ground, and also an old flame, and she is still not quite over the breakup. So, sounds like a really good premise, doesn't it? Lots of internal and interpersonal conflict inherent in it, right? Most of the conflict in this book ended up being punch, punch, fight, fight, throw magic spell, which is just not as compelling to me. So here's the things that I really didn't like about this book. The first is that it spends so long recapping previous books in the series. Like, this is supposed to be the beginning of a new spin-off series, and yet it's so connected to the old series that it really can't stand on its own. And because of that, it's constantly reminding you what happened in the previous series. And this is part of the author's writing style. I've read lots of books from them before, and they usually do this. And they always give you so much detail about what happened in the previous book and spend so much time recapping previous events. And whether I have a perfect memory of those events or I have never read those events before, I still hate it when this much recap is spent on them. It slows down the pace of the story, and this book had it even worse, where it was not only recapping previous events in the series, it also was explaining the world, assuming that you had no familiarity with the world building and spending a lot of time on that. But on top of everything, it was also recapping itself a lot. Sometimes this author does serialized chapters on their blog, and I suspect it might have happened here because every chapter felt very much like, remember what happened last chapter? Okay, now we're gonna do a little adventure. Okay, now let's wrap it up. And it never really felt like the story had enough momentum in itself because every chapter was stopping so much to recap what had previously happened in the book and in the world. And it felt like this plot could never actually get going because it was spending so much time doing the recaps that all it had time for was little episodic things. It's like it was a lot of bite-sized fight scenes instead of an actual novel with structure. Anyway, I DNF'd this at 54%, which is sad because looking at the average rating of 4.5, I was expecting this to be a very good novel, and it was very not good. So I'm giving Blood Heir 2 stars. So I'm off to my next read picked by my husband, and hopefully it's better than what we've gotten so far. Sweet, so we are 2 down. Thunderhead gave 3 stars. Blood Heir 2 stars. DNF at 54%. So we're not doing too hot so far. If you listen close, you can hear Seth over my shoulder giggling.
We'll see how the next one goes.
So we'll see how the next one goes. Hoping for a 4-star plus. Okay, I got paranormal space opera, fantasy, sci-fi, young adult, historical fiction, romance. I think what I'm in the mood for most right now is historical fiction romance. And I suspect I know what this is.
We'll see.
And I have a reason why I haven't read it yet. Here we go. It is what I thought it was. So this is book 1 in a series called The Work and the Glory. And this is a historical fiction series set around the origin and the foundation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the 1830s, aka Mormonism. And that's my religion, so it's a big part of my cultural religious heritage. And being a kid who grew up in this church and was a reader, I had so many people recommend this series to me. So many, like, old people being like, oh, you like to read books? You know, I think you'll like this one book. It's about history, and that always sounded so boring to me. So I just avoided the series. But I knew at some point I'd have to read it because it's one of my husband's favorite books of all time. Another thing that's made me nervous about starting this one, in addition to it being a historical fiction, which I don't read very often, and a book recommended to me by a bunch of old people who didn't know me, which, like, I really love books with themes of spirituality, but I don't love books that are really like saccharine, preachy vibes. And I've always kind of worried, as this book is popular with members of the church, that maybe it does have those vibes. Anyway, but I'm both excited and nervous to start this book because it's about something that's really important to my cultural heritage and also one that my husband absolutely loves. So we'll see how it goes. A lot of pressure on this one. Hopefully I like it though. So, Pillar of Light, I've now finished it. How did it go? I so dearly wish that I could come on here and tell you that all my reservations were wrong and that I loved this book. But I can only say that all my reservations were wrong and I disliked this book for completely other reasons. Now, I first want to say that I had a lot of fun reading this book because I got to buddy read it with my husband, and it's one of his favorite books. And that was just such a fun experience to be able to discuss it deeply with him. We got it as an audiobook and listened to it on a long road trip, and it was a joy to experience it. I still didn't like the book, though. So I think the first reason why I didn't click with Pillar of Light is just it's so intensely historical fiction, which is not a genre I have always loved. And it continued here because we would be constantly getting info dumps about historical things, and I didn't care about any of them. Like, someone would use a certain type of candle, and then we'd get a paragraph explaining the history of that candle, and like, I was so bored, and I hated every single time we got these historical interludes, and they were often. Especially because, like, none of them ever became relevant to the story. Like, you could have cut them all out and the story would have read the exact same, but better. Okay, so that's the first rant. The next rant is that this book is seriously lacking any main character energy. It is a historical fiction about the founding of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormonism. But we're not following any of the actual historical figures in that event. We're not following Joseph Smith. We're following his fictional neighbors because the author decided to create new fictional characters. And in some ways, that was an interesting and good decision, but in other ways, it completely failed. Because our main characters would be doing their things, which were like family drama and love triangles, which I'll get into more later. And then occasionally they would run into like one of these actual historical figures who would then give an update on what they've been up to. And the things that they've been up to were always more interesting than what our actual protagonists were doing. So every single time it was like, wow, Joseph Smith is really doing a lot of interesting things over there. We're not following him though. He just gets to do random updates every now and then to remind you that that's the historical setting that we're in. And it's just like our protagonists, what they were doing was so boring. And not only was it so boring, we were constantly being reminded that right next to them was other people doing way more exciting, complex things. And it's just like, if you wanted to write a book about this historical event, you could just like make the main characters people who were actually important to those historical events. Or make your fictional people important to the historical events. If they wanted to like splice these people in there and shove them places that they didn't actually belong in history, like I would have been fine with that. And yeah, it just like the fundamental structure of who we're following in this book feels so lame. Because most of the important historical events were completely off-screen and only reported in dry ways after the fact. Now, to counter my 2 negative points that I just made, I have found reviews from people who are fans of historical fiction and who do not have a connection to the Mormon Church, and they seem to love this book. This book has actually a pretty high average rating on Goodreads, and lots of raving positive reviews of it. Apparently it works for people who are fans of historical fiction. I'm not one of those, though. Okay, so continuing on the complaint that a lot of the important events were off-screen, it wasn't only the historical important events that were off-screen, also events integral to our protagonists' journeys were just off-screen, and it was so annoying. Like, for example, one of the main things in this book is we have 2 brothers, and one is the good boy and one is the bad boy, and they both have a crush on this girl Lydia, and it's a love triangle between them. And there's lots of drama on this love triangle, and one of those is at some point, Lydia offends the good boy brother, Nathan, and he storms off and he's all mad at her. And she is a very proud woman, and she doesn't want to apologize, and she does a lot of soul-searching and character development, which is all off-screen, and decides that she is going to go and apologize because this relationship is more important to her than that, and she wants to do better. So first, all of that soul-searching is off-screen. But then, we have a scene where she's going to his house, and she's trying to get to talk to him and stuff, and then the scene ends before the apology actually happens, and that also happens off-screen. And this book, the structure of it is repeatedly like that, where like, the intense character development moments and turning points of the story are off screen. Not 100% of them, but I'd say a good 50% of them are just like implied moments. And I'm like, what? But I wanted that! But I wanted that scene! That was the one I want! Anyway, annoying, unsatisfying, frustrating. I also didn't like our woman love interest, Lydia. She was annoying. Pretty much the only character traits she was given was that she's proud, conceited, and likes to flirt. Made it a little hard to get invested with the love triangle. Also, the narration style was messy. Sometimes we'd be in very close third person, and then all of a sudden we'd be jumping out to like omniscient third person with the historical info dumps and also other things. And I didn't like that inconsistency. Now, with all of those complaints, I do see the appeal. If you're a fan of historical fiction, you might love this book, and I've heard the sequels get even better, and I see why my husband loves them, and also why he has so much nostalgia wrapped up in this series. Going into it, one of my biggest worries was that the religious aspects of this book would be overdone and kind of too preachy, but honestly, that's one of the few things about this book that I have no complaints with. I felt like it was very well and evenly handled, where it's just kind of like in the background, like, hey, there's this new religious movement forming. And we had characters all along the spectrum that were passionate and wanted to believe in it, and characters that were skeptical and thought it was all hokey and didn't want to follow it. And I felt like all of their voices were given about equal weight and importance, and it felt very fair and reasonable and more like the religion aspects of this book were a source of inter-family conflict and inner conflict for people rather than just shoving it in the reader's face. That reservation was proven wrong. I do think that this book does that well. So, I'm glad I read this book. Discussing it with my husband was fantastic, but I do not think I will be continuing the series, and I'm going to give Pillar of Light 2 stars. It is time for me to scratch off another. Have I finished the last one I scratched off yet? No, but
I'm reading that on audiobook. I need a new ebook in the meantime. And he's informed me that some of these have some good ebook options. We get to choose from Paranormal by one of your favorite authors. Or Space Opera has a very fun premise and main character. I think I'm more interested right now in Paranormal because I'm currently reading a different space opera.
And you know what it is?
I do have a prediction. Hey, I know you so well. And you know me so well because I'm going to love this book. And then it's a very good ebook option because we already have the ebook. It's so satisfying to clean this off.
Get it perfectly all scratched. I think you'll like this one. I did. It was a little weird towards the end.
Then we'll have to read the sequel together.
Yeah.
I finished By a Silver Thread and it was absolutely perfect and I loved it. Like, it's so good that I already put it on my best books of 2023 video. This book takes place in an urban fantasy cyberpunk type setting and we are following Lola, who is a fae changeling. And her life is very precarious. Her blend of magic means that she's like right on the cusp of dying and disintegrating pretty much every day, and the only thing keeping her alive is a evil blood magician and his magic. So in exchange for this magic keeping her alive, she is his henchman and she hates this until one day he goes missing. Which is great because then she doesn't have to do her terrible henchman job, but also terrible because now the clock is ticking until she disintegrates and dies. So then she goes on a quest to find him, to get him back so that she can stay alive. And along the way, as she searches for him, she's uncovering a lot of his enemies and his machinations and falling into various traps and tricks and tangles. I love this book, I think most for our main character, Lola, where she doesn't fit into any of the typical protagonist archetypes. Like, she's both soft and fierce. And she's just kind of made of this bundle of contradictions and internal conflicts that makes her so fun to follow. Like, she's incredibly powerful. She's a shapeshifter and she can make pretty much anything out of magic, but her magic becomes more of a hindrance than a help at most parts in the story as she's starting to disintegrate and losing control of it. She feels pretty naive in that she hasn't really had a life. She's just been like this henchman all of her life. And in this book, she's kind of getting her first taste of freedom and independence. But also, she knows the dark belly of the underworld. She's been working for an evil magician. She knows violence and she's ready to enact violence if it means that she gets what she wants. She is cutthroat. Well, also, she wants to be soft and make friends and not hurt anyone because she's had enough of that life. She's good at it, but she doesn't want to. She wants honest connections with people and to build relationships, but she's in such a precarious place in her life that she feels like she has to emotionally manipulate people in order to get what she wants. She was perfect and so fun to follow. And this book's plot was also fantastic. I did see some of the twists coming, but some of them I did not. And it was so fun to be along with the ride and trying to guess things. One of the main mysteries in this book is that she's being chased and targeted by this kind of urban legend made real, and it was perfect. In the beginning, it was just the right level of spooky and turned into just the right level of mysterious and had me intrigued all the way. Additionally, there's a few people who are after Lola's affections and a fun romance in this book that I was shipping all the way, and I loved it. I loved it. I'm so excited for book 2. I also love the plot structure of this one where it had a contained adventure and it all wrapped up so satisfyingly. Where book 1 was enough. It was a perfect meal. And then also, it left just enough loose threads to make me very excited to read book 2. Expertly done. I loved it. I gave By a Silver Thread 5 stars. And I've already scratched off our next book, which is also the last book of the video, which is We Are Legion, We Are Bob. We Are Legion. I have a lot of notes on this one because I feel differently about the first half and the second half. From the get-go, I was hooked. The premise of this book is we have a guy and he dies at the beginning of the book, and then his brain is preserved and he wakes up like over 100 years later and he has been turned into an AI. And if he performs well at his AI duties, he might become the governing computer for a space exploration probe. And if he doesn't perform well at his duties, he will be shut down. So he's very invested in becoming a space probe. But he's not only invested in it because his existence is on the line, he's also invested in it because he's a huge nerd who's just super interested in space probes, and having his afterlife be exploring space is incredibly appealing to him. So the beginning of this book is him adjusting to his new digital circumstances and really relishing it, figuring things out, and it was so fun to follow. It really reminded me of the energy of Andy Weir's work in like The Martian and Project Hail Mary, where it had the tinkering fun science project and also a little bit of humor in there. So then he sets off to space and he's out exploring. He has to do some battles with other AI probes from enemy between nations that want to destroy him, and he has to destroy them first, and it's fast-paced and it's fun. And then we got to the second part of this book, which is the part where the title, We Are Legion, starts making a lot more sense. And it's also the half that lost me a little bit. I was still enjoying it, but so much less than the first half. I would give the first half of this book 5 stars. The second half, though, so part of his mission is to clone himself and send out more space probes to explore and conquer the galaxy. And he eventually decides to do this. And then suddenly we're not following one main character, but like 7. Because it's him and all of his clones, and they all set out to like different galaxies to do different tasks. And I was excited for these clones because there's a lot of potential conflict with making clones of yourself. What if you don't get along? Who is in charge? What arguments and difficulties could you get into with your own clones? However, this book is not interested in that and doesn't really explore any of those conflicts. So, we are just suddenly following a bunch of different missions to different space things. We have, one of them goes back to Earth to help evacuate an apocalyptic situation. One of them goes out into a planet and finds primitive sentient aliens and helps shepherd them through their own caveman age. One of them is just exploring, finding planets. Another one is building a home base, and etc. And though every plot was fine on its own, none of them really gripped me, and I hated switching between them so much because we never got enough time to really develop good conflicts in any of the plot lines. Each plot was only fine, not awesome and gripping like the first half of the book was, and I hated how unfocused everything suddenly became. And then even by the end of the book, though most of them have gotten a teensy bit of resolution, most of them are left very dangling. And that felt unsatisfying. So I breezed through the second half of this book, and I was enjoying my time with it, but I didn't love it, and I think I'd give the second half of this book 3 stars. So that averages out to, I think I'm going to give We Are Legion 4 stars, and I'm kind of excited to read the second one, but also nervous that it's going to be more like this half of the book that I didn't like, following too many narrators on too many missions and very disconnected. So now that I've finished all the books in this video, I'm very curious to see what my husband thinks of all of these reviews. So let's jump to his reactions. So, I'm so happy with the functionality of this sheet. Mm-hmm. Like, it's scratched off well.
The stickers work so well.
The stickers worked so well, which is great because this was the pilot program, because now I'm doing this for my patrons. If you want personalized recommendations from me, which I love giving and I put so much time into, I'll mail you one of these sheets. It's for Flamingo Tier Plus.
It did change the format a little, but
it's true, because this was the beta, and it has since improved and become more beautiful.
Totaling up the average star rating that she had was 3.2 stars, so not bad.
Not bad. Slightly below my average, but only slightly.
Not bad. So Thunderhead, I think we both had pretty high expectations for Thunderhead.
Yeah, because Scythe was so good.
Scythe was so good. And Thunderhead was just disappointing. And you read the 3rd book. Mm-hmm. I didn't read the 3rd book, because you said it was really bad.
It was.
And after she told me what the 3rd book was about, and yeah, I'm not gonna read it. Blood Heir, that was actually a complete shot in the dark. I have
and a miss.
No idea what this book was about. I just kind of found it on her want to read and was like, yeah, this has a 4.5. She liked the first one. Sure. So throw it on there. Unfortunately, it was apparently a really terrible book.
But it was a good try. Mm-hmm. I also thought I was going to like it a lot.
Yeah. Pillar of Light is kind of unfortunate. I thought you'd like it.
Mm-hmm. I know you did. And thank you for putting it on the list.
I did forget how many of the historical jump-ins there were.
So many.
When I'm rereading the series, I tend to probably skip over those a little bit. Because I really, really like it. One of my favorite characters in all of fiction, in case anyone watching this likes historical fiction. By a Silver Thread, that was like, if you were gonna like any of these books, it was gonna be that one.
Mm-hmm. It was that one.
Fantastic. It's such a good book.
Yeah,
I read it before.
Yeah, I got an e-book copy of it, and then I shared it with him before I read it, and then he read it.
And I was like, she's gonna love this book.
Worked out quite well.
Yeah, like out of all the books that are on here, I think the first one that I thought of that was like, I need to put this book on here was By a Silver Thread.
And then probably the next one was Pillar of Light, because you really wanted to read it.
We Are Legion, We Are Bob was another one that was a little bit of a shot in the dark. I actually knew what it was about, though, so not as much as Blood Heir. And it just seemed really fascinating of a premise. And so I'm a little disappointed at how the second half turned out, but the first half was great, and that's what I was hoping the whole book would be like, but apparently it wasn't.
It was close though. I think you'll like it. You should read that one.
I probably would like it.
Yeah, this was a very fun project.
She did a lot better than I did.
Oh yeah, what was the average star rating of the ones you read for me?
I didn't actually grab them. Hold on. Let's see.
Watch him do the basic math in his
me,
head. It's so impressive to me because I cannot.
About 4.8. 3.8, sorry.
That's less impressive.
Those are 4s, not 5s. But still very good.
Still very good. I didn't get any 5 stars out of you. The lowest was 3-star. And that was the only one I hadn't read, so...
𝐂𝐿𝐻𝐿 was almost a 5-star. I was debating about it for quite a while. But project isn't about those.
No. The project was about having fun, sharing books we thought each other would like, and testing the scratch-off system, and integrating the feedback into what I provide for my patrons.
I've already thinking of some books for her next one.
And I've already made the next one.
I'll already have a second one. I have to finish the book club book first.
Which you should sign up for. It's also for my patrons. Yeah, this is the one we're reading right now in the month we're filming this.
This
is the one the book club is reading next.
Probably good.
And if you liked this video, I recommend watching this fun book experiment one next.
Just right on my face.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it's gonna go.